Loud. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Agitator. Today on the show, we have Andrew Edwards, author of King of Dogs and Crowbar. King of Dogs is, I describe it as No Country for Old Men meets Tom Clancy's Without Remorse. It is a survival story set in an alternate history post-apocalyptic America. And Crowbar deals with MK Ultra's little known but much more sinister sister MK Often, where Sidney Gottlieb greenlighted a program to essentially try to harness the powers of black magic for governmental power. So that book is like a kaleidoscopic, almost Twin Peaks season three, weird Elroy-esque, I don't know, just a little piece of madness. But Andy, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I
All
appreciate that.
right. Yeah, the so I wanted to kind of get started um close to the beginning. So in terms of your writing, what inspired you to get started? Was King of Dogs your first book?
Yes.
Okay, so
Well, I had written, the first one that I put out to the public. I'd written, I think, six or seven before that. They were all pretty amateur.
when you say amateur, what made them amateurish? Was it the prose? Were they just a mess? What was wrong with those books?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that in the end, it was something not, I mean, all of those things probably apply, probably one
Hmm.
thing or the other was missing, but it was really just something internal to me that seemed okay, this is a real book, and maybe that was just my level of self-criticism, or if we could get into the particulars of those, if you want more. But
No, yeah, I would. I would like to hear about what were the books that led up to because King of Dogs arrives in a way that feels very fully formed, right? Your voice is very strong in that book. And so I'm curious about the ones that didn't make it. What was
sure,
going on with them?
I think that in part when I got into this, this was quite a while ago. I wrote my first. Um, In fact, so here's how kind of how it goes. It's coming back to me now. That very first one was actually pretty good. I still love it, and I know how
Hmm.
it goes, but it fell into some sort of major cliches, and that was the one that I kind of realized as I sat down to write it. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just, like a lot of people probably think, what else am I going to do with my life? I can work in a ditch, and I have done a lot of that, but I don't want to do that. I seem, doesn't by birthright, don't I get something out of this? Like some sort of
Hmm.
measure of like interesting work. And not that you can't find that in many other ways, but I just looked at what was in front of me, the skills I had, my interests, and I thought, well, I got some time, I'll take a shot. And so I sat down to write it. Immediately, just had no idea what to do. I had no concept. I remember just being really like boggled by the fact that you could write a scene and then it's just it's anything. So as you write a couple scenes, you're like, fuck, how is this supposed to go together? And my solution at that time was to sit down with the movie Chinatown. And I just watched it for like 5 straight days over and over and over. And I wrote all the scenes down. I tried to see some sort of logic. And I eventually kind of made progress with that. And then I wrote that book, and it was probably, I don't know, maybe about the length of Crowbar. Not a
Hmm.
really huge book, but it had some coherence. And I moved on right at that same time period. I started taking a lot of screenwriting classes. I took them in this college environment, and I just did it every semester. I would just take the same class over and over, and I'd write a screenplay, and the teacher would say, "Hey, nice work. maybe you should be a novelist, though. He wasn't really impressed with my screenwriting, and they were not that great either. So fast forward maybe like 5 years, I've had to, I was in my 20s then. So like every guy in his 20s, you're like, how do I get laid? How do I proceed in life? This would have been early 2000s. And jobs weren't like that much. They were. I mean, I think it's really, 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 really absurd now what younger dudes are going through. But I'm here to tell you, like, it wasn't that easy back then either. It was very confusing. A lot of the same sort of fraud and scams that are playing out today were beginning to
Hmm.
gather
Hmm.
strength then. And we had like no idea. So you just felt like an absolute loser. Like, why didn't I mean, the world has told me, well, you're a fairly sharp person. I didn't even get into like state level MFA programs. Like, I mean, it
Hmm.
was just like shit canned. Like, no, no way, dude. So all that stuff is just to say maybe 5 years went by and then I had some time again between jobs. I would live out this thing where I'd work a job, I'd get fired or I'd quit, and then I'd have maybe, a 2 week window before the rent and everything else. And the reality hit.
Hmm.
This was before I had kids and everything. So I would usually use those times to try and make something, create something, like how are you going to solve this problem of having a life and some meaning, a purpose and all of these sorts of things. So I wrote one of these little moments occurred, and I wrote the first draft for King of Dogs in I think the end of 2007.
Mm,
And
okay,
then
wow.
yeah, and it was a marathon. I mean, it was, about 10 years later when it was actually finished, and I didn't work on it diligently or anything. There were whole years where I was just very depressed about it and again trying to make a living or be married or what have you. And then I guess just kind of circumstances came together where, pardon me, it came time where I had developed it enough that I was happy with it. So that was like, yeah, about 2017, 2018. And then I finally published it in 2019. And yeah, I don't know how interesting that is, but I mean, it's maybe interesting in the fact that if you stick with it, you hear that,
Hmm.
you hear
Hmm.
that from the old timers. They're like, well, just keep going, keep going, keep going.
Hmm.
I mean, if anything I've learned about writing or whatever, like the process, creativity in general, I think it is that. Um,
Hmm. Hmm. No, absolutely. And something that you said that was very interesting in there is that you're moving from these jobs, and I know exactly what you mean because when I was in my 30s, I was living in Portland and I was working as a desk clerk at Fountain Plaza downtown, and I was
yeah,
also working at Safeway, like a Safeway in Tigard, and I'm like, dude, I'm like 35 years old, like like I was supposed to be like a teacher or something, right?
yeah,
And but what you said was that you wanted to find some kind of meaning. I think that's pretty deep, and I think that that's a pretty honest reflection of what we're actually doing when we write these books, is we are looking for some kind of meaning making. And you can really get that sense in this is something that I definitely want to talk about when we get to it. But in a book like King of Dogs, I really like the kind of practical spirituality that Grayson kind of espouses within the book, which I'm assuming, might reflect your own thoughts on life as the training ground for death. Um, but I think the main takeaway that I got from that is yes, I mean, keep trying, but also understanding why you do it. I think that a lot of people write for to get back at their dad or something. I don't know, like some kind of
yeah,
like they need to feel something about themselves. And in both King of Dogs and Crowbar, I felt a search for meaning in a very kind of orthodox way, or an encounter of the mystery, perhaps might be a better way
yeah,
of putting it. But I
yeah.
mean, what do you think of that?
Well, that's good. I mean, to jump to the into the real stuff at the beginning is probably a good move because
Mhm.
um like those writers that you mentioned where I mean, when I see Substack, right? Like I'm kind of I guess still new to Substack. I didn't really make much effort at it, and I'm not a huge social media guy in general. I think it's, for a lot of reasons I try and avoid it, but then I get sucked back in. So when I do go to Substack, I look at it and I'm like, man, I mean, I'm pretty old guy. Like I just turned 50 and
Sure.
I see that some of these people on Substack, and I realize there are probably millions and I'm just getting this sample, but it feels a lot like a type of Ah, Arrested Development, I
Hmm.
suppose,
Hmm.
where they're still scrapping over the same ideas that maybe, and I didn't know that you'd spend any time in Portland, but I've talked about this elsewhere that for all of Portland's faults, there was a kind of ethos that I grew up with of the idea of selling your soul. There was like selling out, and not everyone took this seriously. There are plenty of examples of guys and girls who claim to have been the real thing and who really aren't. And so I've wrestled with this and tried to understand it this whole time, 25 years. And I think that this would have been more of an automatic understanding if we had a society that was, more sensical and coherent and where we're living through like a period of disintegration that by extension is going to make it really difficult to find something like meaning. I probably would have been a dude who'd been pretty okay, with just like living in a like a tighter community and having family and maybe, having a few hobbies that I got into really deeply, like hunting or something. But none of that is, we have to make that now, is what I've come to realize. But I lived
Mm-hmm.
through that period where it was kind of like pre-internet, pre-Trump, pre all of that. I'm still in my 30s and 20s, kind of casting about, sort of looking at, well, okay, yeah, I guess I could really buckle down and try and get some sort of straight job, but I don't want to do that, and I know it's
Mm.
going to be pretty meaningless. And these are the sorts of choices that I made with my life, and I can't really say, oh, well, I recommend this or I don't. It's just very contextual to, time and place, and the meaning thing, I guess what I'm trying to say is, so we go back to those Substack writers. I don't feel like a lot of those people actually care about that. And
Mm.
it's kind of
Hmm.
interesting because like, well, what do you care about? Like, I guess it's money, or I guess we're just dealing in dopamine or something, like being cool, getting laid. I None of that stuff has really ever motivated me. Um I think Cormac McCarthy might have put it best where he just said like, uh why why would I do anything that didn't take years of my life and potentially drive me to the edge of suicide? Like there's a challenge to this whole process that I think a lot of people do what I did many years ago. They kind of casting about and they think, well, I don't know, everyone's writing, maybe I'll write. And you realize like, yeah, you can write. I mean, sure, but I mean, of what value is it if you don't
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
go deep, right? Sorry,
Hmm.
that's a pretty rambling answer, but um I'll kick it back to you nonetheless.
No, no
Nonetheless.
worries, no worries, no worries. No, no, I love that. This is good shit. Yeah, I mean, basically the kind of search for meaning in books, I think, is the number one most important thing. I was talking to Matt Sini on the Getting Lit podcast the other day about this, about how, as a writer, I think we were talking about what makes people want to read certain people, because my contention is that people read authors, they don't read books. So I think what people are looking for are people who have a kind, or writers rather, who have a kind of signal that they're putting out there. They have a way of looking at the world that is unique to them. It's becoming so important in an age of AI, but we kind of saw the creeping in of AI before AI because people became AI. You began to see people on Twitter or Substack or what have you behaving like bots and regurgitating opinions. And they didn't really have anything. Like, if you just found a person who had some kind of niche interest, it could be birds, it could be ancient Orthodox. It could be Seraphim Rose, right? Something like
Yeah.
that, where they're writing about these people. I remember clinging to those people like Jack in Titanic, right? Like I'm in this freezing fucking ocean and I'm like, "Oh my God, there's somebody who's interested in something, somebody who's actually trying to put something forward." So I totally see, and I mean, and it's fun and fulfilling to do something like that. I mean, with my own books, I have a very clear through line of my weird obsessions, right? Like story as living being type thing. You know, it doesn't really matter what I'm writing, that's the through line. And I think with yours, there it's very interesting because there's a lot of stuff in here. I like Crowbar, I read as like literally the battle for the human soul, right? And
Right.
these kind of sinister forces, to use the have you read Peter Levenda's Sinister Forces?
I have read one of his books, and it must have been that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But Peter Levenda basically he has this 3 volume series, and he talks a lot about Ultra and Often and the kind of satanic forces that have been, you know, destroying America's soul, like rotting us from the inside out type thing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know, when you look at a book like Crowbar, it really is like these forces of good and evil, and the evil ones are way evil, right? So you
Right.
have D'Angelo, who is a fried serial, like insane serial killer, who's been kind of let off of his leash. You have Cohen, who's I don't even know what you would call him, like a fixer or a kind of an almost an Epstein type character. Speaking of Epstein, Robert Maxwell is a villain in this book. There's a lot of characters from real life. You have Jerry Garcia, you have Ken Kesey, you have Michael Aquino is in it. And so you basically have taken the structure of something like the Cold 6000 or American Tabloid, and you've moved it to 1982, and you've injected it with Lynchian darkness, right? But it's
Yes.
yeah,
That's exactly what I did.
Lynchian darkness, and but I think at the end of the day, when I was finished reading the book, there's something about, you know, Grayson has to physically stand up against physical odds. Okay. He's
Yeah.
got, he has to survive physically. And it feels like Crowbar is that, but spiritually. And by the end of the book, you get this kind of almost via negativa type thing where through all of this darkness, you do feel a kind of hope at the end of it. It's dark, but there's a kind of human thing going on. I have a bad habit when I get excited about books of rambling, so I'm sorry about that. But
Hey, no, it's wonderful for me to hear, because I mean, you've had this experience, I'm sure too, where you sit down in your little hovel, your little safe place for a year or 6 months or whatever, and you put this
hmm
thing out, and then hey, you had your experience in the moment of thinking all these things through and making the connections or
hmm
and building it out, and then you put it out, and back in this time previously, like kind of casting about in my 20s and 30s, I would hear that thing about, you'd hear it from like basically, no offense to MFA typewriters or hardcore feminists or whatever. I mean, we may not be pals, but well, I will just go ahead and critique this. I would hear this idea like of the writer community or like, and I just fucking shake my head like,
mm
whatever, man. And even though I knew that that was a true thing, it felt to me like these people had corrupted it. And so that's just to say that now, having gone my own road and found a few other people who, like yourself, who've gone your own road, it turns out that that's actually true. That
mm
going out into the world, as David Milch was the one who kind of pass this on to me. This is one of these ways where, like, I write a thing, you see it a certain way, you tell me what you see, and it's like, oh man, you know what? You're right. But I had never quite seen it from that, even though I wrote the damn thing. And I,
Hmm.
and I really, I mean, you put
Hmm.
a lot of thinking into it. But so to hear it, so succinctly kind of, described like you just did, well, it's got these various elements, and it goes into this Lynchian darkness, but then, and it is dark. I mean, there have been any number of people who have kind of either DM'd or left a review, and they're just like, nope, I'm out. Far too disgusting and dark for me to get through.
Sure.
But absolutely, I mean, what would I be doing if I can't, if I, as the guy writing the story, can't go in there and figure out where is like, where is the meaning?
Hmm.
And even as convoluted as it is in Crowbar, yeah, I'm just trying to say you're exactly right. There's this more powerful, even kind of thing happening, and maybe many things happening below that narrative, um, kind of surface level.
Right, because you have Jay and Al, the Rhodesian mercenaries who have been exiled from their homeland. I think that's a very important part of their character. They're unmoored. They're in America, but not of America, so to speak. And they are kind of the lens through which we see a lot of this madness. You also have Satya, who is kind of a decommissioned, often victim. There's a character who's kind of like the cowboy in Mulholland Drive. He's not like the bad guy in Lost Highway. He's more like the cowboy, right? He shows up and he's like, I'm gonna tell. I mean, literally, actually, I think in Mulholland Drive, the cowboy says, "I'm gonna tell you this once. I'm not gonna tell you this twice." And then,
Right,
and the red denim Japanese guy in this one, he's like, "I'm gonna tell you something. You're not gonna understand what I'm saying." So
right.
he kind of is able to decommission this kind of sleeper agent woman just kind of through talking to her. Um, oh, there was something that I Oh, and then I mean you get deep in this book, man. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it kind of seemed like there was a line in there where it said that, like the human soul, I pictured it almost as like creating a bubble around itself that invited both angelic and demonic presences to do the work of architecting the soul. Did I put were you thinking that?
Well, I mean, I thought a lot of things in terms of how to build out some of the mechanics, right?
Yeah,
Of
that's what I
because
want to get into. Yeah, yeah, that's what I want to talk, like the mechanics of Crowbar.
okay, so I wouldn't say that that's not. I would say that what I'm, if there's any art, to what, and I guess there is. I mean, to Crowbar, a big part of that to try and condense something like you said, the Elroy-esque, um, historical revisionist kind of idea into less than 300 pages. You're gonna have to make some decisions, and one of those decisions was I'm gonna have to give the reader, even though I may have an idea, like a theory about, and we can go all the way down to the very bottom about, and I can explain how this would work. I'm just gonna give the reader enough pieces so that they can track it down if they want to, and we're gonna keep this thing moving. So to answer the question about like the soul, and I mean my basic conception on this, and this is just me, what my real belief is that you have a soul, and there's a part of it that's, it cannot be corrupted. It's literally a piece of God. And how this all works within like our view of that, or his view of us within him, um just speaking in the traditional terms of God here, I usually don't use, I just think of it as this panentheistic sort of idea where we my idea is that like we're basically constituted in a sort of darkness or blindness or ignorance about what we're in, and it seems to be part of our problem of figuring out why, like what are our origins. And many writers and thinkers and stuff have approached this. It's just what I've cobbled together. My understanding is that our difficulty in like apprehending our real situation must be part of it's intentional. And I don't,
You're right, right.
well, God's perfect. So yeah, of course it's intentional. So I sort of postulate a type of game or system of well, let's just call it a game. And along the way I have to leave these breadcrumbs for the reader. And if they want to explore those, I think they're solid and valid. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right about everything, but I do think that part of this is you have the MK Ultra piece where these guys tried to like this actually happens. You know this, and I guess people are waking up like this minute literally to the fact that there are people who have attempted to like fracture the soul in some permanent way, like soul fission or some shit.
Yes.
And so what is the energy that's released by that? Well, that's a curious question to me because I don't think that given the fact that we didn't actually know what we were doing going into it and a bunch of sort of I think of them as mechanistic, materialist, biological driven people
Hmm.
are mostly at the helm of these projects. And so to them, it's just like, well, it's just meat, whatever. And so from my point of view and others who come from a spirit first type of mindset, it follows to me that in the phrase is like they don't know what they're fucking with. Like
Hmm.
I think David Lynch actually sort of alludes to this in the third season of Twin Peaks with the character of Bob coming through, the
Hmm.
nuclear explosion. And so yeah, just to wind all the way back to your original question, the idea that there are, demons and angels partaking in this. The part that's interesting to me isn't necessarily that that's the case. I think that people have thought that was the case for, thousands of years. But what else is below that? If my experience is that the last couple generations of Americans, at least, have just been accumulating shit and trying to put death off and not thinking about what living is really much at all. And so
Mm.
I think what I'm trying to do is to say, okay, if we can all come to this point where like, oh, there is a supernatural that's woven into this thing. There isn't a separation really between supernatural and natural. It's like I always call this ultra natural. It already is this way. And if we're willing to kind of look at, all right, yep, demons and angels are part of it. What else? Like, what is going on? But what are they doing? Why are they
Mm.
doing this? How do they operate? And how do I participate in that?
Mm.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Yeah, and I think that when it comes to I want to get back to people just focusing on staving off death and not really learning how to live. But I tend to think so. Let me give you an example. When I read it was either American Tabloid or The Cold 6000. There's a scene in there where they go down to Jack Ruby's ranch in Mexico, and I think
Yeah.
he's fucking dogs or something. Now, is any of that actually capital T true? I don't know. But here's the thing. I'm not really, as a novelist, I don't really give a shit what technically happened. You talked about mechanistic materialist type thinking. Those
Yeah.
are people who want to say, well, no, but what literally actually happened, as though that gets you to capital T true mystical truth, right? So when I read a book like American Tabloid or The Cold 6000, that becomes part of my headcanon for how things actually are. And I think in a lot of ways that's more helpful than knowing the exact facts of what these people were like. They both have their advantages, right? But I think a pitch that I would give to listeners for Crowbar is that I think that this is an actual good, like whatever literally happened or didn't happen, right? Whichever character is made up or not made up, or whether or not Barack Obama was on this boat or whatever. Uh, this is my headcanon now because the book is a great key to where we're at now. Everybody's frothing over the Epstein files, right?
Right.
But I don't think I don't th I think people understand that there's some pretty sick shit going on with these people, but I don't think they quite realize how sick it actually is and how intentional it is. 1966 was an important year, right? That was the year that MK Often got greenlighted. That's the year the Church of Satan was founded. Uh, there was all sorts of bad, like I think spree killings became a thing in 1966. I can't remember the guy's name. He killed like 8 women. He's who I thought, like Rick Shaw or something like that. Anyway, he's the one that D'Angelo reminded me the most of. But basically, so that's what is that now? 60 years? That was 60 years ago? Holy shit, yeah, that's 60 years ago.
Yeah,
Since then, it has been a constant symbolic spiritual war against the psyche of America and by extension, because we're the exporter of culture, the entire world, right?
yeah,
And
right.
I when I was a kid, I loved all that like metal, and I still like that kind of shit. I think as an adult now with the spiritual practice and a kind of grasp on this thing, I can dive into those waters some more. But I can't pretend that the several decades of like my 20s and 30s walking around feeling empty and lost and all that wasn't the result of and it feels so funny too because like back in the day Tipper Gore was like enemy number one because she wanted to ban things like Grand Theft Auto and NWA and all the cool stuff that I liked.
Right.
And I'm not for banning, but I really do think, just to get back to the Epstein files, like I don't think people quite understand how depraved and how gross it is. And I would say to people who put down your book and couldn't finish it, it's like, grow up here. Look,
Dude,
stare into the
exactly.
abyss.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. In fact, there was one guy who I reached out. I won't say his name, obviously. A rather successful individual, not really in our milieu, like fiction writer, but I thought that he might have some interest in it in certain aspects of it, and he put it down for that reason. That was exactly what I said. It's like, what a fucking pussy.
Yeah, right.
And
Exactly.
I wanted to say too, and then I want to throw it back to you, is just like literally last night, I'm sitting here in my little place thinking about observing this unveiling or whatever that's happening on X. And I thought the exact same thing that
Hmm.
we still, people don't, I think they just have a hard time understanding, making that leap to realizing, because um, it's so forbidden, so taboo, or so bad. And it's also like it takes so much effort. I mean, can you imagine like the billions of dollars that had to go into creating some disgusting environment where people could pull this sort of stuff off? I don't have, well, to go back to like your 20s and one, there's like this pull into darkness to explore it. Again, Lynch talks about this all the time. I think his masterpiece, well, he has many, but I mean, Blue Velvet, where you have the Kyle MacLachlan character who's kind of being pulled into this darkness, and in large part, it's just like life. I mean, he's got this more kind of twisted, sexualized woman, and then I mean, in the like Isabella Rossellini character, and then he
Hmm.
has the Laura Dern, the blonde, she's the cop's daughter. Um, and he's having to deal with like his juvenile sort of worldview being assaulted in a way. And yeah, that's like the trauma of that is very interesting to me, and I'm no stranger to it. Like we don't want to turn this into like a personal thing, but um last night as I was thinking about this, like why is this so it's decades. We've been doing this decades for people to get around the fact that like, yeah, man, there's people that will just treat little babies like a boneless ham or whatever. Man, that's just fucking. I know it's evil, like, but like you said, grow up here, dude, because somebody's got to deal with this shit, and it's us.
Yeah, my dad was my dad was in the army. Um, most of my family, I'm like the first generation that didn't enter the military, but he used to say this kind of stuff. And as a younger man who's rebelling against the dad, I'd be like, "You're being ridiculous." And he'd be like, "No, you don't understand. Like, there are satanic forces at work here." And like my papaw worked, at the Pentagon, like with the CIA, and he would tell me this shit too. Like he'd be like, "You don't understand how dark it is." He would never give me like specifics, but he'd be like, "Yeah, you don't get," which is really funny because actually my sister worked for the FBI for a while, and she had a completely different read on it, where she was like, "Nobody knows what the fuck they're doing over there." So maybe that's the new FBI, right?
Right.
But back in the day, I mean, and you would hear like Dad would tell me about going to places like Afghanistan and describing some of the horrific shit he'd see over there, and I just wouldn't believe him, right? I feel bad about it now because it sounds like you're making it up. If you say like, "Oh no, like they fuck kids and eat babies and all this kind of shit," you're like, "Well, it can't be that bad. Surely not." Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
is that bad. And I think in the book, the kind of the scene that shows this the best, and I actually thought it was kind of darkly funny, was the one where Cohen opens the box with the kid in it, right? He cuts his toe, he's doing some sort of satanic ritual, but he's so high and so overwhelmed by kind of these dark forces that he starts puking and shitting all over the place, which is inherently funny to me because I'm a child. Uh, but
It's
like
supposed to be, and you're
the
the first person to say it, so please
there we
continue.
go. Yeah. Uh, and there, but I think like the grossness of that scene and the character of D'Angelo. I think those two elements of the story are really supposed to get people to start wrapping their heads around how dark all this is and how it extends to every like it's a conspiracy in the sense that everybody who you think of in Hollywood or musician wise or what like Jay-Z and Pusha T are in that they're all like it's everywhere. Every single one of them in order to perform you know, this kind of like symbolic sigil magic at such a grand scale, you have to be in. You have to be initiated in some way, shape, or form. And there's really no end to it. As a matter of fact, not to get too far off topic, but I've often thought that Kanye West was actually maybe one of the only ones that wasn't. And ironically, he's positioned as, the crazy anti-Semite but I think he just has seen too much, and I think it broke his brain. Um, anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, something like King of Dogs and Crowbar, though, it does put forward a way of living. I think King of Dogs does this much more, right? It's even got the subtitle, make sure I get it right. Life is a training ground for death, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk about Grayson's kind of, I describe it as practical Orthodox spirituality, right? There is a scene where he rescues a young man, like a 19-year-old kid called Ben, from being raped by two guys. This is after the kind of contractor forces. So, for listeners, what happens in King of Dogs basically is it's never quite pinned on any one nation, but suddenly the town of Moab, where most of this takes place, is overrun with private contracting militias, basically. And so he saves Ben from two of these, whether they're thugs or militia members, I can't remember. But Ben is torn up about it, obviously. He's a kid who is suddenly encountering just how dark the world could be. And, he's like, oh my God, like they were gonna fucking rape me. Like, what the hell? And Grayson, who's a character who I like a lot, tries to soothe him in a way that only Grayson can. And he's like, think about it this way. What if when you die, everything just gets harder? And so, what you need to do in this life is experience difficulty, embrace challenge, work to make yourself better, work to survive, not to avoid death, but to become stronger for whatever comes next. And I thought that was such a cool, fresh take. Like, there are a few books that after I read them, I'm like, I want to be cool like that character. And King of Dogs was one of them. So kudos to you for that. But yeah, talk to me about where Grayson's ideas on life and death and survival kind of come from.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very gratifying to hear that even if, you know, a handful of people can take that away to say, because that really was how I conceived or tried to build Grayson as somebody that you could put in your, as you say, I like this idea, the mental cannon,
Hmm.
uh, and you can pull him out, because he's like you say, very practical and very useful. And so, to try and describe as you say, like where this comes from. Yeah, a good piece of it is well, for a while I had a notion that maybe this life training for death, that the afterlife might actually be more difficult than this. And so it isn't just this, oh, I made it through life and now I get to relax, which seems to
Yeah.
be um, I have for a while I thought, man, I might have had an original thought. Like, has anyone else ever thought this? And it turns out I think a couple people, thought
Yeah,
of it
yeah, yeah.
before me.
Okay.
And I think that in Orthodoxy, it's dealt with differently. But one thing I really love about Orthodoxy is the idea of the mystery. And so whether it's a priest or a theologian or whatever, a wise man will kind of lead you up to the gate of it and then back off and say, like, this is about what we know. And I can
Hmm.
respect that a lot. I can respect this a lot more than like um, the kind of fundamentalist Christianity that was around when I was a kid that was very off-putting to me. This is like apparently the real Christianity. But there are a number of guys you can turn to in that tradition. I could send you a list. I don't want to throw them out because I could be wrong. Uh,
Hmm.
but I go to like Maximus the Confessor.
I was about to bring him up. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple guys that if you read deeply into it, what they seem to be saying is actually like I look at Maximus the Confessor and I'm just standing in awe. Like this is maybe the greatest philosopher of all time, and almost no one knows who he is. And I had
Hmm.
no clue until I was probably 40 that this man exists. I didn't really understand Christian theology, and I hadn't really exposed myself to its power. But to get back to the grace and try and answer your question, I mean, a lot of it maybe just comes from I there my upbringing was maybe only it was pretty normal. If you know Tigard, you probably know West Lynn.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where I grew up, mostly from about I was born in Portland and then we moved out there. And it wasn't the super swanky like thing that it is now. It was actually a really nice place to be. And I got into sports very, very heavily. So I was with private trainers a lot from about um I don't know, fifth grade or something on. And that was and I wound my way around to a guy who's kind of infamous now in Portland basketball circles. But and he's a whole other thing. We could go into him if you want, but I look at my life and I realize like he was a felon. He had been put in this place called McLaren, like a school for
Mhm.
boys for doing very bad things. And later in life he went back to jail for some pretty heinous shit. But I spent a lot of time with this guy, a black man from Portland, like a native Portlander. And the truth is that he taught me some things that I don't think anyone else could have taught me. And some real basic shit came to me like a gift. It's things like this where I'm looking again at Substack and I'm like, who the fuck are these people? Like, have you people ever even like have you ever been in I don't even mean to be like, oh, fist fight or whatever. Like, okay, avoid fist fights, but have you been out of the house at all? Like, geez, dude,
Mm-hmm.
life is really messy, and it has many, many angles. And it feels like a lot of the stuff that that's forced on us now is just I don't know, very, very divorced from reality. But
Mhm.
anyway, we don't need to go too far into him. But I learned a lot about what real life is and how you do have to. So Grayson, I think, is informed by him. I think it's informed by action movies too. When I set out to write King of Dogs, I wanted to write like a really smart action movie in
Mhm.
novel form. That was
Mhm.
really it. I didn't have um, much beyond that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What can you give me some examples of what you learned from this guy? Uh,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you. So we can go into this because I've never talked about it yet. So his name was Howard Avery, and he's still, you can look him up on the internet. He was like a private coach. Basically, I mentioned Westland because it's right next to a place called Lake Oswego, which
hmm
is notoriously called Lake No Negro,
hmm
in the kind of twisted, weird,
Sure.
what self-hating white people type of vernacular. Um, so to have this guy, this black dude from like inner city Portland who had been to prison, like no shit prison, and had I don't know the extent of, the bad things that he had done, but he got caught for a number of them. And I spent a lot of time in like controlled environments, one on one. And this dude was, let me say, like, there's a guy, an NBA player named Damon Stoudemire, who was like late 90s or early 2000s. He was an all-star. I used to play with him all the time. And it would
Hmm.
be me and Howard and Damon. There was another guy. There was a few other people. Terrell Brandon, I think, made it to the NBA. And so this was an environment where a kind of a scrawny, not terribly gifted athlete, white kid is being thrown into an inner city gym at age 15, 16, 17, entirely surrounded by people of another race, um, and being forced to compete in that place. And
Mhm.
there were some astounding, when I look back at them, I'm like, how could I ever explain this to people? There was one instance where I'm in the gym and we're with like maybe five dudes, and these guys are not, um, they're thugs, they come from a thug type environment and they're going for the NBA and they happen to be incredibly gifted. Some of these guys did go to the NBA. We're playing and Howard stops. He sort of ran the situation. He was a coach, so he's informing and teaching, and he stops and he says, "Who's the smartest person in this room?" And all five or six of these guys just kind of hang their head and they fucking point to the white guy, point to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And he says, right, everyone in this room knows that's the smartest motherfucker here. And
Mhm.
that's been a theme, in my life to some extent, in other places as well. But the next thing he said was, "Who's the toughest here?" And it was like instantly there's a contest between these five other dudes. I'm not even in the game. Like I'm not even in consideration. And the truth is like, I mean, depending on what you call tough, maybe I would contest that. But at the time, I mean, no, every one of these dudes would kick the living shit out of me. And I'm really saying this to illustrate the level of physicality that I was dealing with is mind blowing. Like people do
Sure.
not understand how strong and fast like really great athletes are. And so I think that a lot of my life really was affected when I was in physical contest with people who like were built like a literal jaguar in
Yeah.
comparison to your average dude. And
Sure.
it isn't necessarily to say white dudes or black dudes or whatever, but at that time in the early 90s, that was a sort of accepted thing. Like black people are great athletes and white people are kind of coming in. And it kind of turns out to be a little bit different than that.
hmm
However, these guys had 4 to 5 to 6 years on me, and I'm kind of just into puberty, 16 years old. It was very eye-opening to say the least about
hmm
how like no matter what you do, I mean, you can
Hmm.
go to the bottom of the barrel and this dude is going to physically manhandle you. And then,
Hmm.
and I think that a lot of my life really was changed more by that than it was by reading Hemingway or whatever else.
That's so interesting. There's a parallel in my own life. I grew up in a town called Lawton, Oklahoma, which, when I was growing up in it, had the dubious distinction of being somewhere within the top 10 most dangerous cities in America, right?
Yep.
Have you been to Lawton?
I know a little bit about it, but please,
Yeah,
yeah, tell me.
yeah. So Lawton is attached to Fort Sill, and therefore Lawton doubles as a kind of dumping ground for people who get fired from the Goodyear plant, lifers who've always been there. It's a very flat, very ugly place, very psychically oppressive, but it's also a playground for GIs, right? And so growing up, I mean, I would walk to the Super Video store every day and I would just wonder, like, is somebody going to throw a bottle while screaming faggot at me, right? And
Yeah,
I think like that um, that kind of upbringing, again, this kind of acknowledgement of just how strong and just how brutal people could be and getting
yeah,
your ass kicked a bunch but just knowing like what that feels like, the actual feeling of getting hit in the face so hard that your eye swells up, is when they call it getting rocked. It's an alarming experience, right? Your head suddenly feels like the center of the entire universe, and it's creating like this black hole, and you just realize like, oh yeah, I could be, if something like King of Dogs were to happen, like you're not John Wicking your way out of it, basically. You got to find a better way of doing that. And I think, to tie it back into what you're talking about with these kind of online social media people, they do just kind of live in this world where they like to kind of war game out these scenarios, and politics is kind of a game, and collapse is a game to them as well. And I mean, even if, I mean, we have guns. It's Oklahoma. Like, everybody here has guns. But like, some people really know how to use those guns. I was watching a guy
yeah,
who was like in the CIA, and of course, I trust anything a CIA agent says only as far as I can throw them, which is not very far. But he was talking about Delta Force, right? And he was like, I've never seen anything like it. He's like, they're like ninjas, you know? I've never seen people at a full sprint actually be able to hit targets the way that they're able to. And all of this, I think, is to say is that it informs a worldview where there's a little bit more tooth and claw, right? Nature being red in tooth and claw, rather than this kind of like very domesticated world that we live in. And again, the same way that I don't think people quite understand just how deep the depravity of the powers that be goes, I don't think people realize just how tenuous the thread is on which we live. I mean, you have a bad ice storm here, and if your pipes freeze or you're cut off and your heat goes out, like, you could die. And
yeah,
so with somebody like Grayson, what's so interesting about him as a character is that he does a lot of breathing in the book, which is always important to remember, to just be able to breathe. But he also he has this humility that I really liked, and his and just an ability to be like, number one, I'm going to keep my promise to my dead friend, right? That's, for listeners again, like, the whole reason he's in Moab is because a friend of his made a dying wish that Grayson would protect his little brother's wife and their newborn baby. Um, but his approach to suffering is very, very Eastern, I think, in a way. And I mean that in the Orthodox sense, but also in the more kind of Asian traditions, right? It's like, this is kind of what we're here for. And I think that kind of shit is so cool. Makes me want to not bitch about shit. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I
yeah.
gotta go to
Life,
work. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
life
yeah.
is much better without, I always think this all the time. Like, we could handle life in America even so much better if, like on a spiritual level, we could breathe, we could have
Mhm.
some perspective about our finite time and these sorts of things and be more content to, do menial work and shit. If the deal was just a little bit more fair, and you hear this a lot, right? Like, the 1950s were great or whatever. But
Hmm. Hmm.
I, that's still where I'm at, in my I don't. They have this thing called syncretism where
Hmm.
in Orthodoxy, you might get in a little bit of trouble if you're having bleed over, but this is already the case. And actually, Seraphim Rose, who's in Crowbar, or sort of in a way is in Crowbar, he
His
has,
remains.
yeah, his remains are there. There was a guy, his kind of study partner or something, Hieromonk Damascene, and he had their hand in this book called The Tao of Christ, where they go through some Taoist Zen sorts of stuff, and they kind of overlay it onto really heavy um, Orthodox theology, and you see that. I mean, it's not a perfect overlay, but
Hmm.
dude, it's
Hmm.
close enough that if you're
Hmm.
breathing and you need to use a Zen thing to get there, do it. I do it every
Hmm.
day. I have to do
Hmm.
it. You mentioned Delta, and so in some of the way that King of Dogs worked out was that I had been doing a ton of training, tactical training and such. I was not in the military myself, and I think I felt a little bit um ill-equipped, to handle life. And so I did spend maybe 8 or 10 years doing this, and I got to spend 5 days one-on-one with a pretty famous former Delta guy. And shoot pistol and carbine. And I guess I can say his name. I mean, it's Mike Pannone. You can find him on Instagram. But this is a dude who, this is NBA level gunfighting. And
Hmm.
even NBA players go, yeah, Mike Pannone. Like this dude is. And the level, I mean, the amount of shooting he does every year is he's going through hundreds of thousands of rounds. He's already gone through millions of rounds in his life. And it is what, as you described, like, bro, if you run into this guy or somebody like him, like,
Hmm.
there's not going to be any, running off to the woods or any shit like that. Like,
Right.
people like that we're going to have to hope that he views life a little bit like we do. And
Hmm.
and absolutely, yeah, Delta Force, even an infantry guy though,
Yeah.
these infantry guys get no love at all, extremely dangerous,
Mhm.
and not, and to be respected and appreciated because they've done and seen shit that the average person cannot fathom.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And again, it does kind of put you, like I'm very aware of where I am in the pecking order of life. Growing up where I grew up kind of taught me that, right?
Right.
Where it's like on the one hand, you can't be a bitch because then you're a target, right? So I learned how to have conversations and how to be funny.
Yeah.
And that was my survival mechanism because otherwise I'm getting fucked up, you know?
Right.
Like if but um yeah, with the tracking in King of Dogs too, I really liked how Grayson approaches it as this art where you have to kind of put your own imagination into it. I felt a connection between the way Grayson viewed tracking and actually writing itself, right? Where you're kind of following these crumbs and then you're sort of using your intuition to tell a story about what happened there. But that all felt very real to me and very tense as well, especially when he kind of escapes. It's an action movie, right? So he gets caught by the bad guys and then he escapes. And the escape scene, I felt it was really tense because like these guys are working at levels upon levels upon levels, and you're in Grayson's head, and you're thinking, oh damn, that's pretty fucking smart. Like he'll probably and like the bad guys are already there pretty much, and it just creates this impression of like, oh yeah, like there are these forces that you can be as badass as you want to be, but there are people who's like that's what they've done with their lives basically.
Right.
Um, and then it's so funny. I was at work. I work in construction, kind of. I work in sales for construction. And I was telling this one of my coworkers about what happens to Denny in King of Dogs, and he was
Yeah.
like, "I was like, oh shit," it was fun to see Denny again in Crowbar. That
Yeah.
was I was like, "Oh, hey, I know what happens to you."
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool because in Crowbar you have Denny like you see every kind of level of this conspiracy that's going on, and he's just being initiated into it. And they tell him the whole deal, right? Like this is what we do, this is what you'll get out of it, and he goes, "Fucking sign me up. I'm good to go." And then we see where he ends up and what he's been doing all those years, and it's like, oof, I don't know, I don't know. Oh, before I get too off track though. What is the significance of Seraphim Rose's remains in this? Are they just relics that are forces for good? Is it went over my head.
Yeah, I think well, in Orthodoxy there is this idea of, as you say, relics where they're no shit, magical amulet power. There's
Yep.
something very serious about them. And I I I wanted to sort of suggest in the story that uh, once again, maybe because I don't know. I guess most people probably have this kind of dim version of what the spiritual realm, like, what is it? What do they do over there? What are they
Hmm.
waiting for? We can need some fucking help like right now. And I got to thinking about this for a long, long time, and so I started. I mean, it at the one level, like you're a writer, so it's a MacGuffin. It's partly to move things around, and then it's also to try and suggest that maybe there's some sort of market, right? For that's what
Hmm.
we do here. I mean, we have fucking markets, and we seem to revolve around them, and they become of huge importance. Maybe they have something sort of like that. Not in the gauche kind of um material level that we do it, but perhaps there's something going on there. And again, I'm just trying
Hmm.
to kind of insinuate and suggest as opposed to um build like some perfectly mechanistic universe for a reader. In truth, like as far as I know, Seraphim Rose, I think, is interred at his monastery. I think that's where
Hmm.
he's buried. And I know that specifically to him, so he has this book called what is it called? Orthodoxy and the New World Religion or something like that. And this is the book where he grew up in this milieu in or came up in San Francisco. So he was in the 60s, and he knew
Hmm.
about Alan Watt and the Grateful Dead and all that stuff, and he rubbed shoulders with them. There are some stories where um he wasn't too distant from that. And I just found that very interesting that it's likely, in the Elroy-esque sense that he would have been at parties or little coffee clubs or whatever with people who went this way with their lives,
Hmm.
but yet
Hmm.
he's right there and he goes this other way. And it isn't to say, this one's absolute right, this one's absolute wrong. I don't think that the world, as we've been talking about here, like, you the way good and evil seem to work is you're going to have to confront evil, maybe with, something closer to good, but it isn't that none of us is. Another thing I really appreciate about Orthodoxy is like getting around the idea that we're not broken is like step one. Like we're all broken. We all have
Hmm.
these potentialities for evil. And so that book that Father Seraphim wrote actually deals with a lot of this stuff, like maybe a conspiracy involving MK Ultra and non-human intelligence and UFOs and all. Like he had his finger on that stuff like way back, like in the 70s.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this has played a big role online, and it's influenced me to an extent. So that's part of his place. I'm not actually like a huge. Some Orthodox are really into Seraphim Rose, and I am. I mean, I appreciate him, but I just don't. I have not read all of his books, and there's so many. important Orthodox writers or saints to get into that I feel like he's a part. He's playing a
Hmm.
role right now, and that I don't know. Hopefully that kind of explains his part
Yeah,
or
no,
help.
absolutely. Yeah, there are some I mean, Orthodox, right? Like Callisto's Ware is good.
Yeah.
And I've got this book that I'm reading. I can't remember. Let's see, who the Magus of Strovolos right now, which is really cool. It's kind of like there's this book that I read called The Chronicles of Tao, which is about a Taoist monk who lived for like 300 years, and it's purported to be nonfiction, right? But it's how he learned all these Taoist techniques for super strength and flight and all this kind of stuff. And the Magus of Strovolos is sort of like that, but the Orthodox version. There is a lot of whether it's Martin Shaw or Paul Kingsnorth. It does seem that there's a when I go to an Orthodox church down the street, St. Elijah's, and when I'm there, it seems like a lot of dudes,
Yeah.
like about my age, are there, and I see kind of like a revolving door of them. Some of them stay, some of them come for a liturgy, and then they leave or whatever. Uh, but what is it? What is it that is it the mystery that attracted you to it and keeps you there? What's you? Give me your sounds wrong. Give me your pitch for orthodoxy.
Okay, so I mentioned Portland and you visited there or lived there. So
Hmm.
I mean in the 80s and 70s, I mean I really grew up in the 80s and I guess early 90s. And it isn't that I think of my parents as I particularly my dad. I've come, I'm 50. Like we're at this stage where he's, moving off the stage and we're in this, I'm evaluating life and all and him and his influence and all that. And
Yeah.
and my dad was a great dad. Okay, don't get me wrong. Like the dude went absolutely I would put him up against any dad that ever was in almost every way. And I say like he is not like a professed Christian. Extremely intelligent, far more intelligent than me, and that, plays a role in our relationship and how I perceive him. And his exposure in life, he's a boomer, and it taught him that, Christianity isn't the road, let's say. But when I watch his behavior, he's the most Christian dude that I know. I mean, I would put my dad up, and I'm not exaggerating. I know. I mean, of course it's biased. But dude, I'd put this guy up against any number of Orthodox priests and say, let's look at what really happened here, dude. Let's look at this man's
Mm-hmm.
soul versus this other man's soul. And I mean that. And it, the Orthodox Church can boot me or whatever, but I mean, this is a fact. That's how this man lived. I mean, he's a kind, generous, like gentle, deep fucking thinking guy. But he's not a Christian. He didn't get baptized. And for a lot of people, this seems to be like, I don't know, like, well, I guess that's that. Well, no, it's not just that. That's my fucking dad. And I'm going
Mm-hmm.
down with my dad. Okay. I'm going into hell to get my dad if I have to. So this is what I'm really trying to say maybe is like, for me, this is not a case closed type of thing because I grew up in a milieu where Christianity wasn't the thing. And
Mm.
like the way it was in the South, even in my era. And look how Portland turned out. Pretty bad.
Yeah.
And yeah, pretty
Yeah.
fucking bad. And so in my experience of life, not avoiding suffering, not avoiding pain, in fact, maybe embracing it at times a little bit too much. And then I have no other way to say it other than God has come into my life. Like he made
Yeah.
it it made impossible to not say, well, okay. And so I look at my dad and I say, dude, my dad almost didn't need that. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like he's more of a saint than, I mean, I'm not even in the same like same game as my dad.
Sure.
And I think about this and I'm like, okay, what would Hegel say? Like, is this or what would Kant say? Like the idea of this theophany, like evil happens or whatever, and it's just going to come down to some mechanistic thing where you walked into a church and got baptized. Maybe, maybe, but I I I had to at a certain point recognize that maybe in some ways, you know. more gifted than my parents, but also not as gifted in other ways, and that I do need something like the mystery, the open acknowledgement that this thing that we're doing is really hard if you take it
Mm,
seriously. Like life, it can
mm,
be really, I mean, I have, I do this, like this is how I live. I mean, I have three sons. I have another one on the way. We don't
congratulations.
have, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the main thing in my life, but we don't have organized our lives around spreadsheets or the way things might hopefully turn out. I have made I say it this way all the time, like I've doubled down and then doubled down and then doubled down again so many times, making this bet that God's going to grab me and I'm going to force some sort of experience of unity with him that it showed up and it was extremely fucking painful
Mm,
beyond anything that I mean, like I can't go into it here.
sure.
And then his grace turned it. And I
Mm,
realized like my dad didn't need this because of the way he was constituted. And what does that mean? In like, if time is not just a fucking line, if
mm,
you hear this sometimes where from God's perspective, or maybe the angels and demons, time is just one instance and it's like a storyboard where everything is happening. Okay, well, what is then my dad coming before me does not affect this like causal thing. Maybe I affected him and he affected, that's how
yep.
multi-dimensional theology really works. And
Yep.
it really took me and my kind of obstinate, probably very prideful personality quite a long time and I felt like maybe it's pride where I had to glimpse behind that thing that and be like, oh my God, that's beyond human comprehension and it has nothing to do with anything ever taught to me before. Okay, that's enough. I don't need to know anymore.
Mm,
I wonder sometimes if my father um already had sort of a grasp on that. And like
right.
that's why he didn't need to press this issue of God, where are you? And all of that.
Mm.
And how does this work? And I may just be kind of talking out my ass on some of this, but that's about as close to my truth as, I can share because you know, with respect to religion and orthodoxy right now.
That's beautiful. First of all, I think you'd really like a book called Retrocausality by Eric Wargo. No,
Oh,
it's not called It's called Time Loops. What am I saying?
I
But
know this
yeah,
book. I know
yeah,
that book.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's good, man.
Yeah.
I don't know where he's at. I don't know. Maybe he went back in time or something. I haven't heard from him in a while, but Time Loops is a really, really good book, and I totally believe I 100% believe that the past is changeable in the present. Like I don't think it's a static fixed thing. And I think that wizards with their little black cubes are doing it all the time, basically. And that's why we get things like, the fruit of the loom doesn't have a cornucopia in it anymore, that type of shit. But I do like this idea of your dad being a person who didn't necessarily need the kind of salvation that some people do. I grew up in a very evangelical setting, and that's what pushed me away for a long time. For that exact reason, it was mechanistic. It's a cliche. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but in the evangelical church, you can do whatever the fuck you want as long as you get baptized and ask for forgiveness. And what is that, man? That's a get out of jail free card for doing pretty much whatever you want. I don't think that's the way it works. I also don't really think that hell or heaven is necessarily what evangelicals posit it as, right? It's all just a scam to get people to keep filling the collection plates anyway. But I think that the real thing is you said it earlier in this interview is like when we're born, we're all born broken in a particular way, and the game, if you will, is to figure out how to unfuck yourself, basically. And it's different for everyone. I had a very similar experience where I did not come to where I am through rationalizing it. But that was the lesson that I needed to learn is to stop thinking. I'm an overthinker, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't, it's sometimes torture being in my fucking head. And when I finally just was like, yeah, I'm gonna start going to this place, and I yeah, had maybe similar, maybe not similar experiences to you, but um, that was the major thing. I was like, oh, I need to stop thinking so much. And when I stopped thinking, I started writing more. It was weird. Like,
Same here. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's like the words start coming out. It's the you hear it in a lot of Eastern religions too. It's like oh, and Grayson says something like that too. He says like the evident path is not the path, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of that too, because the way I take that is like the evident path is the path upon which you have contextualized and put into words in your brain. That's what evident means in that case. And sometimes it's not, you just gotta feel. You just gotta kind of be. And I think that's what writing is too. I do think that it's a craft, and I think that it's something that people can learn and get better at. But I also think that it's a mystical thing too, dude. I mean, I feel like Crowbar is an extremely mystical book. It's just it's got that feeling of a it's got a charge to it.
Thanks,
And
man.
oh yeah, of course, yeah. I'm just gassing you up, bro. Like no, it's
This
good.
it is.
Yeah, but it does have that kind of, talking to you and coming to you with the, half-cocked, harebrained ideas of what's going on in the book and the response of, you putting down these breadcrumbs, not necessarily knowing where they're going.
Right.
It's interesting. I mean, but I get what you mean, right? So my first book came out when I was 23, and it did really well for the time, right? Which was really bad for me as a writer because it made me think that I knew everything. I was like, oh shit, yeah, just one and done, baby. But in that book, it's about prisoners in a Siberian gulag who try to escape. This is in 1952, right after Stalin died. They go to escape and they take a prisoner with them who's called a calf. And a calf is the person that they eat when they run out of food because they're out on the tundra. And spoiler alert, the book ends basically all the prisoners have, or one of the prisoners has this thing where like his throat opens up and like a little parasite thing will come out while he's sleeping and start writing shit. And the end of the book is everything goes wrong, right? Obviously. Um, but the end of the book takes place in like this market in the Himalayas somewhere where people sell clothes for afterbirth, right? Which is like a real practice that they do, I think, in Tibet or something like that. Like they'll keep the not the caul, but the placenta, right? And they'll
Yeah.
actually clothe it and treat it like a baby. And the ending of that book, everybody was like, people would be like, I know what you were, I get it. I know. And I was like, I don't, I was just vibing. I really don't know. It felt like a good idea at the time. But so I 100% get what you're saying with a lot of the stuff in Crowbar. Like when you're writing it, tell me if I'm wrong, it's not intellectual, right? It's just this feels like what needs to be here.
So yes, exactly. I cite sometimes as my mentor in all of this stuff, this guy David Milch, who
Mm,
he did NYPD Blue and Deadwood.
hmm.
And so
Yep.
what I gleaned from him is exactly I sort of learned my lesson with King of Dogs. Like I realized David Milch is right. And what he taught me, and he's taught many others, anyone could probably find it online, is that it's exactly that. It's a spiritual process. And so you or me, or any other writer or whatever, will have to do the work. This is how I really think of it now. I think of becoming a writer is actually going through the hardships and experiments and whatnot to get around to a place where you're just actually able to do it. That's like the hard work. As you pointed out, like, yeah, there's craft and read Stephen King's on craft book and you're good. Like it's fine. It's good enough because you can break all these rules and So what does that mean? Well, what it means for me, it turns out, is that I have to structure my day and the time period that I'm going to write in such a way that um, I can allow for these practices. Basically, I do a ritual, a series of
Mm,
rituals to hopefully sort of purge myself of myself and allow whatever is me to, as David Milch says, let the spirit indwell and remove the burden of myself so that I can do this. I think at its highest, it is really like some type of a spiritual service for people. And,
hmm.
you know, that's where we get into this whole problem of like, well, I guess I got to be poor because
Mm.
I could probably churn out, I could use AI or something and write like some really um depraved type of like, and I'm sure you could too, right? Like you've probably had this
Hmm.
thought where you're like, man, I could probably do a good grocery store book for the I don't know, the what do they call it? The bodice rippers or whatever
Bodice
it's
strippers, yeah.
yeah. Like and I often get to this point where I'm like, damn, dude, I might actually have to do that. I got another kid coming, like, what am I really gonna do? But I've never so far been able to get myself at all to take that seriously. And I think that's because I've taken the rest of it in complete seriousness. And so for Crowbar, I had these ideas going back years and years. I didn't really know quite where they fit or how to fit them together. And you might find this interesting, or someone else might. I wrote this other book that's kind of like it's a nonfiction, it's like a fictional nonfiction book.
Okay.
And effective what it is, it's like you remember the Roadman, this guy,
Yes.
kind of this Lynchian, sort of like the cowboy.
Hmm.
So this guy hands Al a book, um, or it's sort of delivered to him in the final scenes of Crowbar. There's this little volume, and this volume gets traded back. Maybe it ends up with some other characters. I'm intentionally kind of keeping it this way. So I actually wrote that book that's in Crowbar, this little book. It's
Mm.
called Abstract Operator. And I struggled with this thing for years, like 5 years. I've written 25 some drafts on it until I finally realized like this actually isn't a real book. Like this isn't something that I'm going to give to you and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I would I would give this to you after you went through the world of Crowbar, like in the way that Al and Jay do. That took me an enormous amount of like that's not a logical thing at all. I
Sure.
mean, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
anyway, I'll publish that book at some point, but what I think happened was I stewed on this stuff in my subconscious for so long that when I did find a time and a place where I could do these practices to kind of um I don't like the word channeling. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's
Mm.
more like something closer to like a vibes, a frequency, a thing where you're attuning the best that you can to the work and you're just doing the best you can. And that's enough. Almost every time it's
Hmm.
enough. And so I think that that's how Crowbar wound up existing is accepting like, man, this is just it refuses to be anything like a grocery store book or even a pulp book like genre. I love genre. I always go back to genre. Um, but I couldn't bring myself to just complete it in that way. And I believe that the thing
Yeah.
you're touching on is the reason why. It's because writing really is something other than just producing this object, this like
Hmm.
a piece of paper.
Yeah, I love the idea of a book that's only readable after you've read the book in which it first appears. That's very much my shit. So here's how I've been approaching my newer books. Tell me what you think of this, because I agree with everything that you said. Um, so And for my first several books, I was just completely on that wave, and I was just kind of like, again, not channeling, but kind of catching the vibe and moving with that. So the way I approach it now is to separate the outcome from the process. Um, and it's been very freeing in this particular way. What I mean by that is this. I have had the thought of, oh, I could just write slop and make sure that mechanically I'm hitting the correct beats. I know where the beats go. I've studied it. I've read the bestseller code and the plot whisperer and my favorite, which is Deborah Chester's fantasy fiction formula. It's great. It's awesome. There's a lot of good shit in there. So I've done all that. But if I think about it in terms of like uh, I'm going to try to produce this object that is for consumption, I can't do it. So for Berserker Club, my newer one, I'm basically this, and this is like my hack, right? I'm setting myself up like a little challenge with every new book that I do. And Berserker Clubs was very specific. It was I wanted to get landscape right because in my previous books, it always felt to me that when the characters were in a room together, it was very sparse, very minimalist stuff. I'm also very McCarthy and Elroy influenced. But it always felt like two characters on a stage with maybe a few props, and I wanted it to feel like they were in actual rooms or actually outside. And so when I'm writing the book, I'm just focused on that aspect of it, landscape, right? For the next one that I'm working on, I'm focused specifically on pacing, right? I want to make it so that when you get to the end of one page, you want to turn to the next, and that's all I'm really going to be focused on because there's other stuff now that's running in the background, right?
Yeah.
I can write a fucking killer sentence. I know my limitations and I know my strengths. Extremely good sentence level writer, great at dialogue, great at characterization, and I can do weird shit. So all that can run in the background. But now with each book, I'm it's like one thing that I'm not good at that I specifically focus on. And it makes it fun. It's a fun challenge to do, right? Because you go into it and you're like, fuck, man. I never really thought about pacing. Like usually things just kind of happen in the book one after the other. But what does pacing look like? What element of this craft can I try to draw out? Because I'm kind of half of it, half of my mindset is where yours is. And then the other half of it is I do kind of want the books to be a service, right? Like thinking of myself in a kind of service industry where I'm in some way trying to help or transmit. You know what I mean? So finding
Yeah.
the balance of that for me has been sort of my major project, but every once in a while I reserve the right to write a masterpiece like Crowbar, right? Where I just go fucking crazy, you know? So anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's helpful, maybe that's not, but that's kind of where I'm at, right? I don't think it's a zero sum either or thing, right? I don't know. What do you think about that?
What I think is that if anyone is listening to this and you're getting your game together, I would rewind 3 minutes back or whatever it was and listen to exactly what he just said, because I do believe that is, I do well, I mean, I try to do a similar thing. I just think of it in terms of constraints. Like
Mm.
I'm going to, and I have similar, I have my ideas where I'm like, dude, I know how to do that shit. I got that bag, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
exactly right. Like, fuck, dude, what does it mean to be a page turner? Can these two coexist?
Right.
I think you're absolutely probably in the sweet spot, dude, of really writing. That's my
Hmm.
take. And so, yeah, if you guys are like, man, how do I do this? Go back and listen to what he just said, because I think what you just said was you described a recipe for really, one, doing the thing of like letting your subconscious operate, like you're kind of distracting it, your conscious mind onto this new thing, and thereby getting better at it, but allowing all of this stuff, as you said, to run in the background.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
exactly, I think, what David Milch is suggesting is
Oh,
that
cool.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
really, as you were saying that, I was like, fuck yeah, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Milch too, because John, did you watch John from Cincinnati?
Yeah. Yeah.
That one gets trippy, man. That one gets
It
trippy and
does.
spiritual. And like, it was
Yeah.
such a, because I was a huge Deadwood fan, as I think most guys of our straight guys of our age were. Like, Deadwood came out and we were like, this is the shit. Uh, and John from Cincinnati was good too, but it was such a not a 180, but yeah, there were elements to it that I guess when you go back though and you like listen to Swearengen's monologues about life and things like that, you there's a mystical element to Deadwood that's kind of under the surface, I think. But yeah, John from Cincinnati was like it was what's he up to now?
Oh, David.
Teaching?
So, well, first of all, I agree. Like, I really wanted John from Cincinnati to not get. 'Cause he had bad luck. Like the HBO or whoever made that show just was like, nah, fuck it, we're done. Then he went on to do, oh, what the hell was it called? It was like a race. It was going to be, dude, God, I still, now that you mention it, as you were saying this, I realized, man, it would have been like 2013 or 2014. Someone can go back and David Milch locked down this project that I think would have been maybe the greatest television of all time. He had Michael
Mm,
fucking Mann on board to direct. He had Dustin Hoffman, who I can take or leave, but he had Nick Nolte as the lead, dude. And I'm like, I mean, Nick Nolte is, I'm sure he's a like a difficult human being, but when that guy's on the screen, I'm in. Like, I
yeah,
don't give
yeah,
a
yeah.
fuck what he is. So I was like, ah, this is gonna be phenomenal. And in part because Mr. Milch has been harboring this racetrack story his whole life. It goes back to when he and his dad went to the track when he was a little kid. There's a whole lot of stuff bound up in his life story that he has been unraveling for all of his 80 years or whatever. And just real short, I think the way it worked out was they made like the first 5 episodes and they were showing them, or maybe they made the first season or something. And then because it's at the track, they're using horses. One of these horses went down, and
Oh,
you remember
sorry, go
that?
ahead. I remember this. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
PETA or whoever, who like, dude, I'm the kind of person who I really struggle with holding on to my last $10 for my kids when there's an opportunity to give it to some dog who's about to be killed or a cat or whatever. Like it
Sure.
hurts.
Right.
But PETA is bullshit.
Oh yeah.
This organization is horseshit. They shut the whole show down and HBO walked away. Very shortly after that, Mr. Milch like was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so
Hmm. Damn.
he produced stuff like what was sort of intended to be maybe his memoir, and it's definitely worth getting. His children helped him with it. I mean, this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. As far as I know, he's alive,
Hmm.
probably in some sort of hospice situation. It's very rough. I see these like these Chinese. We see these videos on X where I don't know Chinese peptides or whatever. They found a cure for Alzheimer's, and I'm always thinking, damn, dude, somebody get David Milch to do this shit because he's not
Hmm.
done. And so
Hmm.
that's as far as I know, kind of his condition. But the dude has some deep. I mean, to me, he's every bit the writer that Cormac McCarthy is.
Hmm.
And, and
Hmm.
in many ways, he has like he was a junkie, like a straight up fucking heroin junkie for about 30 years or maybe longer while he was winning Emmys for NYPD Blue and other shows. And then he kicked and he kind of had this next wave, but he always had a gambling problem. And so the
Hmm.
track and the gambling, gambling to me with is a big element in No Country for Old Men. You have this coin and it's like yes or no, hand of fate, whatever. Dude, David Milch had stuff to say about that theme and that like metaphysical thing that we deal with all the time. Like, well, guess I put my seatbelt on, hope I don't get fucking smeared off the side of the road today. Oh, good, I didn't. We live with this all the time. It's just
Hmm.
omnipresent. And I think that Milch had things to say about that. That I mean, again, going back to the spiritual thing, when that happened, I felt like the forces of darkness had had won. They saw a battle that they could fucking win by taking that show off. And I mean, I wept. I was fucking still mourn for that show.
Hmm.
And in part because I genuinely love David Milch and I gained everything from him. Um, I forgot the original question, my friend. I'm sorry.
Me too,
Where
but that was compelling shit. And what you're saying is so fascinating because the idea that Milch had this thing to say and that the forces of darkness shut this production down. When I was on Brad Kelly's show a couple of months ago, I was talking to him and I'd had a few beers at the time, and I was like, man, I feel like we're like warrior monks, you know? Like that's what writers are. And I was like, I'm sorry if that sounds cringe, but the Michelob Ultras are hitting right now and I don't care. And I was like, I was like, but I stick to that. And I'm too old now to give a shit about being cringe. I do think that the best writers who take it seriously could call themselves a type of warrior monk, or monk at least. And that is that we're battling against we have a big bad, right? It's called AI, you know? Like there's a literal demiurge demon that's out
a
there
literal
that is fighting for people's attention to feed them slop so that they can waste their lives at best, right? And what we're doing is we are trying to pull that attention away. So I was telling Brad, I was like, if I can get you for 5 hours to not look at your phone and live in my world, even if my world is full of goofy cartoon violence and a lot of dick jokes, they're funny books. But if I can pull you away and I can introduce some ideas I have about like what is story? It's a living thing. What does it mean to be injected with the story of somebody else? What is it to live life with these stories that we adopt for ourselves that go into our headcanon without our permission and guide our hands in ways that we don't necessarily want to? If we can do that, like with Crowbar, I read King of Dogs over the course of about 3 days. I read Crowbar in 2 sittings. I was just there. You talk about like what does it mean to make a page turner? You did it there because I didn't put it down. Just kept going, right? And what you're doing there is, and I'm not being funny about this, you rescued 5 hours of my life from potentially looking at TikTok or fucking with AI. It's that serious. Now you can't walk around taking life that so you go crazy if you took it that seriously. But every once in a while, realizing that what we do has purpose, it has meaning. Uh, it's a dignified thing. Like we're not hacks. I think that's important to remember too. And I think yeah, a book like Crowbar is a great example of what can come of that when you take this seriously. Oh, I like your stuff back there, man. That looks cool. Your camera's showing me stuff.
oh, because I'm moving around.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. This
But
stuff up
anyway,
here.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah, that stuff.
well, man, you really you almost brought a tear to my eye. That's I mean, I couldn't agree. I would sign off on every single syllable that you just said because and I don't know, I maybe it's worth saying that because for me, it's I'll go away from this conversation and I will realize like, wait a minute, Andy, that dude that you just met today just validated. I've never talked to you before. I don't
Mm-mm.
know how many of the same books we've read. Sure, there's ways that we can like rationalize the fact that not only do you conceive of yourself in a very similar frame, that frame redignifies your and my and the person who takes the risk to buy, 10, $20 for your book. It's incredible to hear you say that. So I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for writing these books and thank you for coming on the show, man. Everybody
My
go
pleasure.
buy King of Dogs and Crowbar. It's early in the year, but if Crowbar isn't at least top five book of the year, I'd be surprised. So you kicked my 2026 off with a bang. Um, Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, thank you. It's mostly X, Golden Goat Guild, and if you go to the link tree, I say go to X not because I want you to go to X, but everything I have, I don't have a website. It's all on that link tree. You can find some reviews, and some links to. I should mention Brad Kelly too. Like, there's something about that guy, man. He's got. I think he. Oh, I love him and I appreciate him a great deal. So I haven't listened to your episode. I'm going to go do that actually this afternoon if I can,
Yeah.
because that must be an incredible talk. So, stuff I did a show with Brad, and there's other shows you can go listen to, but for sure the Amazon links are there. And if you want to buy it, great. I would really appreciate it.
All right, man. Hey, I appreciate it, and we will see you guys in the next one.